Thank you so much for joining us, Dene from Animal Aid UK. We just want to hear a little bit from you first, a little bit about your organization and what it is you do in it.
Animal Aid is an animal rights, animal welfare, animal campaign group who were established in 1977 by a woman called Jean Pink, who was a school teacher and wanted to bring greater awareness of animal rights issues to the public. And way back in the 70s, we've still got the same problems today that animals face in society as we did back in the 1970s. And Animal Aid has become probably one of the leading campaign groups in Europe. We've certainly got a very big membership, and we campaign on many different fronts. We campaign against vivisection. We're a vegan organisation and promote veganism. So we campaign against intensive farming. We campaign to protect wildlife. We also campaign to protect racehorses, which is quite a unique challenge that we've got, because there's no other organisation that have really a specific campaign to help racehorses. And racehorses are ubiquitous, they're all around the world, and they face a lot of problems. And I I'm the consultant at Animal Aid on horse racing issues, and I help out on other campaigns as well, as and when needed. So that's a sort of overview of the way Animal Aid works, and we work with the media, we work with politicians, and of course we have the support of a lot of the public. So we press the animal industries into, we would like to see them all disappear, but we certainly press them into change and reform. And that's our goal and our job. And we enjoy doing that, and it's a lifelong ambition, and it's a thing that pursue. I started at your age, and now I'm an old guy, and I'm still going and doing it.
It's amazing. So you've been doing it since the 70s?
Well, Animal Aid has been around since the 70s. I started campaigning more in the 80s, the mid 80s. When I was sort of 30 odd years old. I didn't get into animal rights till quite late on, around about 30 years of age. So a bit of a late starter, but very passionate since.
And how did it start? How did you get involved, interested?
I think my conscience was sort of pricked when I saw an advert in a paper with a dog with a can over the dog's nose, and the hands. The legs of the dog were tied behind the dog's back, and this dog was going for human consumption out in Korea or somewhere. And I thought, I'd like to do something about this. And I was always passionate about animals, but I never really got committed to trying to help them. But I saw that image, and that really sparked a change within me. And so I decided, I want to get involved in some way. So we started a local campaign group in the area where I live in England. And we campaigned against an intensive chicken farm that went on to supply KFC and supermarkets. And we did a lot of campaigning against that. I went undercover and filmed inside a hatchery where these little chicks were going through absolute torture. It was terrible. And we wanted to expose this. And this is going back to the 80s. And of course, Animal Aid were already up and running, and I was not really aware of what they were doing at that time. But eventually, paths cross in this world of animal campaigning, and I got involved with a guy called Andrew Tyler, who's no longer with us now, but he was the director of Animal Aid at the time, and we decided we would get a campaign going to help racehorses, because that was an area that was sort of missing within the animal campaign agenda, and we wanted to build something and help horses get a better deal. And we would like to see racing banned, obviously, but that campaign grew and grew and grew. And then Isabel Hutchinson took over at Animal Aid, and now we've got Ian Green as the director. I've got two assistants who work on the campaigns, Fiona Pereira, who's a colleague, and Jessamy, who's head of campaigns at Animal Aid, and of course Ian, the director. And we all work together, getting horse issues out in the media, out politically, and out to the public, and want to get change made.
That's amazing. So you've been campaigning for such a long time, right? what are some of the campaigns that you can still remember, maybe from 20, 30 years ago, or just some things that you're very proud of?
Yeah, well, change within, when we talk about change, it tends to be incremental, slow passages of change that take place over time, sort of small changes. But one of the key things, I suppose you know about the Grand National in England, do you? The big horse race where they jump over big fences. It's probably one of the most famous horse races in the world. I personally campaigned against that for over 30 years. And just over 10 years ago, we got a debate going in Parliament where we would like to see the race banned, but we couldn't go as far as that. But we certainly got changes made to the layout of the course, the structure of the fences, so that they weren't demanding upon the horses. So we got radical change at this very, very major and dangerous race. We've also got changes made at other race courses. I've worked on scientific papers dealing with the use of the whip in racing. I've got a whip here now. I don't know if you can see this, but this is the implement that jockeys hit horses with. And I'll show you how powerful it is. I don't know if you can hear that, but
yeah.
It's when a horse feels that, it does actually hurt. And the design of this thing is meant to be cushioned, but most of it, if a jockey hits a horse, it's very, very painful for horses. And horses get hit they don't only get hit on the rear quarters. In an actual race, they get hit in the face. They get hit over all different parts of the bodies. And so I've written a scientific paper on the use of the whip with the University of Sydney in Australia, and a guy called Professor Paul McGreevy, who's a leading scientist on equine matters. And so we've campaigned for changes in the use of the whip. And we've recently seen some changes in Britain in the use of the whip. Jockeys can still use these things. We want to see them banned, but we've seen the reduction in the amount of strikes that they can give a horse now. I mean, it's not perfect, but it is an incremental change. That's another example that we've been working on. We want to bring awareness. I've got something here called a bit that goes in a horse's mouth. You may recognize that.
Yeah.
That goes in a racehorse's mouth, and this is how they're dragged about. And that is or probably more so, distressing and more of a welfare issue that probably doesn't go seen. That's probably not noted. And that, we're campaigning in these different areas. We've also campaigned not only for racehorses, but for carriage horses. And this is a carriage horse bit. I think you're based in Amsterdam, are you? Is that correct? Yeah.
Close.
Yeah. And if you go into Amsterdam, you'll see horses with these bits in the mouths, taking around tourist carriages. And these are hard, tough things. And 8 hours of this in a horse's mouth is very sore at the end of it. So we've campaigned not only for racehorses, but for carriage horses as well. We're involved in quite a lot, but predominantly racehorses.
Yeah.
And we keep something called a website at Animal Aid called Horse Death Watch. And so we monitor all the horses that are killed on British racecourses. And we've also got an Irish Horse Death Watch, where we monitor horses killed on Irish racecourses over in Ireland. And we log all the names and the racecourses where they died, the date, the fatal injury that occurred to them. And this we've put out in the public domain because that information isn't available. It's something that the industry have wanted to be kept quiet. They don't want the public to know that 200 horses die a year on British racecourses. Mm-hmm. They want to keep that secret because they want people to continue to bet on horses. They want people to go to race meetings. And we're saying, look, this is what's really happening. We're trying to inform the public. This is what's happening on racecourses. Horses are dying in the most horrific circumstances. They're jumping fences and breaking their necks. They're breaking the backs. They're breaking the legs. They're having heart attacks because they're having to run so fast and so far. And all these issues we sort of want to bring out and give to the public so they've got a greater knowledge of what is going on in the racing in the racing world, so that the public can make their own decisions whether or not they want to support racing or not. So I've been working for Animal Aid. Animal Aid started in 1977. The horse racing campaign has been going from about the year 2000. So we're into our 23rd, 24th year now. So a lot of work's been done that we've done, and there's a lot more to do. So it's an ongoing campaign, and our ultimate aim is to see an end to the exploitation of horses in horse racing, and therefore an end to horse racing.
I mean, the death watch, what you mentioned, that's quite striking, I feel. And it seems that it's the only way to get people's attention, because without knowing that, people will just keep going to these races, and they might say, oh, it's not that much damage. The whip is not too hard. They don't even see maybe what you showed us that goes in the mouth. I personally never saw that. So just seeing it now, it's like, I never support horse races anyways, but seeing that's another reason why. Was there, before you started making that public, was there part of you or someone in the organization that was maybe thinking, this is a bit too harsh, maybe this is not the way to go? Or are you always more in the mindset of, we need to put out the facts, even if they're horrible to look at, to get people to wake up?
Yeah, it is. The sort of way we structure the campaigns is we look at, say for horse racing, for instance, we have a good understanding of the industry. You've got to understand your subject that you're campaigning against, whether it's intensive farming, animal experiments, saving, a wood in the environment, or whatever. You've got to really understand what is going on within that. And for example, horse racing, you've got to understand that industry. Once you understand that industry, you have to analyze, where are the problems? First of all, are there any problems? Of which, of course, there are. And you establish what those problems are, and you try and find a way to resolve them. So it could be that you go to them, for example, I took a photograph of a horse being shot on a race course. I went to this race course just to see what was going on. Horse died in front of me, was shot in the head. I took a photograph, and that ended up on the front page of the Daily Mirror, which is one of the leading newspapers in Britain. And that got public support, because nobody, before I took that photograph, nobody had ever seen a horse with a gun to the heads before. And then I got the horse dead on the floor, laid dead, and that was published as well. And that immediately made the industry think, right, it's now on the public agenda. It's now on the political agenda, because we took this politically a bit further on a few years later. So we find out what the problems are. We go to the media expose that to the public, and the public put pressure on politicians, and that forces the industry to change. One of the aspects that we worked on was the industry, like many animal industries, regulate themselves. They decide what is good and bad welfare, regardless of what anybody else is thinking, because they have control of that industry. And a lot of politicians allow animal industries to regulate themselves, and horse racing is regulated itself. It decides what is good and bad welfare, which is a totally wrong approach, because they've got a vested interest in promoting horse racing, and welfare is an issue that they want to sort of keep on the back burner, so to speak, out of the public's attention. So we said we need to get independent welfare regulation in horse racing. So how do we do that? Well, in the British government, there's something called e-petitions, where you can start a petition, and if you get over 100,000 signatures on that petition, that has to be debated in the British Parliament. Mm-hmm. Forces a debate. And we got over, and you've got to get 100,000 signatures within 6 months. And we got about 105,000 signatures. So we forced a debate in the Parliament. And what we said was, we want to see an independent regulator. Now, the government, this was back in October 2018, the government said, we won't be making racing independent. What we will do is establish an independent horse welfare board, which was really still an industry controlled board, but it was one improvement on what we had before. So we did see an improvement there, and this horse welfare board has started a 5-year plan to try and implement greater welfare change, but it is still an industry controlled organisation. But it's one step further down the line to improve welfare and to getting rid of racing, and that's through our campaign in Animal Aid.
Interesting. I was just thinking about, so you mentioned a couple of times already about influencing politics and making change through politics. And there's also the other one where you're more trying to influence the people directly. So like the public, society, however you want to call it. Which one? Obviously you do both, right? So you try to influence the public and you try to influence the politicians. Which one have you seen result in more change? Like which one has the most impact, or is that not really measurable?
I think public impact is probably the most important, because it's the public who go racing, it's the public who bet on horses. And if we take another campaign, say a vegan to be vegan, eat a meat-free diet and a plant-based diet, it's the public who decide that rather than the politicians. And the same applies to racing. And a lot of the public put pressure on their MPs, their politicians who represent them in Parliament. So I think the public are very, very powerful, and politicians have to reflect public opinion in order for them to remain in power. So, but you need the politicians, on the other hand, to actually make statutory change, change the laws against these animal industries. So it's a balance between the two, but it's public pressure and media pressure. You get things in the media, get things on the TV, on the radio, online media and print media, newspapers, then that influences the public as well. So it's a sort of what I would say a holistic approach to take. You sort of balancing all three: politicians, the public, and the media, trying to win them all over to try and help them understand what animals are facing in our society and what the environment is facing, say. And I think the public will make up their own minds on that, and quite rightly too. But we're just putting that information out there for them to take on board if they want to take that further themselves. And that's how I see my job anyway.
And with the sharing of the information, do you also do that via not just social media, but in a sort of newsletter or something, maybe something physical that you share? Magazine.
Yeah, we have a quarterly magazine that goes out 4 times a year. It's called Outrage, and it basically catalogues all the work we do over the previous 3 months. It talks about how people can help on campaigns and animal issues. And we've also got some stories in there of campaigners who've done great things. And so it's not only about Animal Aid's work, but about other people's work as well. And we throw in a vegan recipe every now and again, and and promote it. And it's a good read, and a lot of people like something solid to get hold of in their hands and read in their own time, rather than having to go online. So we balance that traditional form of a magazine with online things as well.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. So we try and cover all bases, and of course we do a lot of media work. We've done a lot of TV, done a lot of we do a lot of undercover work as well. One of the key campaigns that Fiona and I worked on, and Jessamy and Ian very closely, was a campaign against the slaughtering of horses. We went into a slaughterhouse undercover, covertly, and put some cameras in there and filmed horses that were going for slaughter. This was a couple of years ago. And we didn't go in there because we wanted to see horses, the gruesome footage of horses being killed, which was very, very distressing. These beautiful animals being killed in the most appalling conditions. And the way they were killed was shocking. What we wanted to do, why we did that, was because the information wasn't out there, wasn't known to the public. What sort of horses were going to be? Were they all old, worn-out horses that had injuries, or were they young horses? Were they race horses? Were they people's ponies? What types and breeds of horses were they? How old were they? Were they fit or unhealthy? So we went in there to that purpose, to find out what is really going on in the slaughtering of horses. And what we found was that wide variety of horses were all ages, all backgrounds, some in very, very good condition and some in very, very poor condition. Some that had been treated very badly and others that had been treated well right up to the point of being killed. And we took that to British TV, BBC TV, and sort of cut a long story short, Britain's premier documentary production company called Panorama broadcast that on main BBC TV, prime time in the evening for 30 minutes. Over 1 million viewers saw the work that we'd done at Animal Aid going into this horse slaughterhouse. We exposed the program makers wanted to focus on race horses, so we focused it on race horses, though other horses were involved, and that shook the racing industry. And after the Panorama program came out, the next day, the British and Irish racing regulators got together immediately the next day, having seen this absolutely damning coverage of racehorses going for slaughter. And they said, right, all horses who are now going to race in Britain must be signed out of the food chain. So from that work that we did, by going undercover, getting it out on main TV, and it was in all the major newspapers, it is preventing horses who are currently in racing from going to slaughter at the end of their lives. So that was something positive, again, from our campaigning. And that's just one of the many, many things that we do. So we look, it's a big thing a lot of people out there, a lot of organizations out there from all walks of life are fighting to get on the TV, to get their subject on the TV. And we managed to do that for half an hour, and over 1 million people saw it. But the key thing was it helped horses, helped race horses particularly.
Yeah. It's interesting how you always, I see it like there is at that time, at that particular time, there is a status quo, like a normal way of doing things. And then there's this pattern interruption that you guys basically create and show, hey, what we're doing, what the status quo is, what is normal now, is actually maybe not that normal. And then I find that very interesting how that creates change, and on a pretty big scale, I think. And that's very interesting.
Yeah, it's like with all animal industries, they work to normalize the animals within the system. So horse racing is looked upon as a normal thing, a normal leisure entertainment. You can bet on horses, you can go to the races and get dressed up and have a drink and have a good time and look at the horses. And that's what they want to promote. Mm-hmm. What they don't want to promote is all the bad side, all the killing, all the bits in the mouth, all the whipping, the deaths. But society has normalized that over many, many years, the same way as meat eating has been normalized for generations and generations. But now we're seeing, a big movement of veganism, people changing the diets, that you don't have to have meat to survive. You don't need animal experiments to, for the future of science and health and well-being. You don't need to experiment on animals in this day and age. And we've got a very good campaign at Animal Aid to the purpose of that, showing that we don't need to experiment on animals. We don't need to kill wildlife. We don't need to persecute wildlife and say certain wildlife is, they're vermin and these animals are not vermin. And we've taken that for granted for so many years. And I think, particularly your generation are really questioning that. When I was your age, that wasn't really questioned very much. You know, it's very difficult to question that. And of course, there wasn't the opportunity where, and again, when I started out campaigning 30 odd years ago, there was, you didn't have mobile phones. You didn't have the internet. You couldn't go on a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
You had to write a letter, and you would put a stamp on that letter, and you would post it, and then you would wait 2 weeks to get a reply from somebody. You know, it was that difficult to sort of campaign and work, and it was pen and paper. It wasn't computers. And now the modern age, things are so quick. They happen, can happen in minutes and get the word out. Whereas in the old days when I started, it was days and weeks. It was very old fashioned. I'm giving away my age now, but I'm well past retirement.
What about
keep going because I'm passionate.
Yeah, well, we'll ask you the last question, and which I find very interesting. I'm very curious about your answer. You've done a lot of campaigns. You've been in this world of campaigning for a very long time, so you know a lot. There's a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. So what are, let's say, 2 or 3 tips you would want to give someone our age or anyone who would want to do something like yourself, or who would want to start a campaign or join a campaign or anything? What are the tips? What is important?
Campaigning isn't easy. It's a long-term issue. So if you're going to campaign, you've got to think about the long term. Resolving things isn't always very quick, so it takes time. So be patient. Be passionate. You've got to have a passion within you to do that. I can see you're both very passionate about what you're doing. I've been passionate myself. My colleagues are all passionate. So passion is a key thing. So those are probably emotive issues. That's an emotive thing. It's something built in and emotional. But there's the other side as well. You have to know your subject. You have to study your subject. You have to almost say, I don't like to use the word enemy, but when I see people in intensive farming or on a race course being cruel to animals, I class them as the opposition. But you've got to understand that opposition, how they operate and why they operate. And then you can start disseminating what is going on and taking it apart and constructing a campaign to destroy that industry. And that is the aim. It's a long, slow process, but understand the opposition and build a strong campaign by breaking into different aspects of what they're doing.
Amazing. That's
incredible.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll leave you with this. Thank you so much for your time and amazing answers.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and I'm definitely hats off to you for the undercover work, because I think that's incredible. That's really cool. Yeah. So thank you so much.
I didn't go undercover personally, but we're a great guy and his team went undercover and filmed that. Yeah. Incredible. We just put it out there. Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. It's a pleasure.